The alarm bells rang through the massive space station that floated in the dark between the stars. Admiral Zexler of the Kfur Navy rushed to the command center, his forearms moving quickly as he grabbed his uniform jacket. His red eyes glowed with worry as he looked at the screens filled with numbers and lights that made no sense. "Report," he ordered, his voice deep and rough like grinding stone. Lieutenant Belcash pointed at the main display with one of her thin blue fingers. "Sir, we are picking up energy readings from the edge of our space. The computers say the signals are moving toward us at almost light speed." Exekler stared at the screen. In his 40 years of military service, he had never seen readings like these. The energy patterns were unlike anything in their databases. No ship in the galaxy could move that fast or produce that much power. "How many ships?" he asked. "We cannot tell, sir. The energy's too strong. It could be one huge ship or 1,000 smaller ones. Our sensors cannot see through the interference." The Admiral's clawed hands gripped the metal rail in front of him. The Kfur Empire had ruled this part of space for over 1,000 years. Their ships were the strongest, their weapons the most deadly. Nothing should be able to scare them like this. "Send a message to High Command. Tell them we have unknown contacts approaching Council space. Request immediate backup." 3 hours later, panic spread through the Galactic Council chambers on the capital world of Nexus Prime. The 12-member species that governed hundreds of planets gathered in emergency session. Representatives from across the galaxy appeared. On floating screens, their faces showing fear and confusion. Chancellor Mordic, the current council leader, called for order with his booming voice. "We face an unknown threat approaching our borders. Our best military minds are baffled by these energy readings. Perhaps it is a natural phenomenon," suggested Ambassador Silthera of the peaceful Yillinary. Her large black eyes reflected hope that this was just a cosmic event and not an invasion. "Natural phenomena do not change course toward populated systems," replied General Thekmer of the Kfur military. His scarred face showed the experience of countless battles. "Clearly artificial. Someone or something is coming for us." In the back of the great chamber, an old figure slowly stood up. Archivist Velmuth was ancient, even by council standards. His job was to keep the historical records, and most representatives had forgotten he was even there. "Honored Council," he said in a voice like dry leaves, "I believe I may have relevant information." The chamber fell quiet. Velmuth rarely spoke during meetings, preferring to watch and record. When he did speak, it was usually important. 3,000 years ago, there was a species that once lived in this galaxy. They called themselves humans. Their homeworld was called Earth. The records show they had colonies on 17 different planets before they ... disappeared. Several representatives laughed. "The humans were barely advanced enough for space travel," said Counselor Zeftai of the Merchant Consortium. "They destroyed their own planet with pollution and wars. Good riddance." Velmuth's old eyes grew. "Sad that is not entirely accurate. The humans did face great problems on their world, but they asked for our help. They begged for aid during what they called their climate crisis. The council of that time voted to quarantine their space instead. Because they were dangerous," General Thokmer interrupted. "The records show they were violent and unpredictable. The quarantine was for everyone's safety." Records also show," Velmuth continued, "that the last transmission from human space was not a cry for help. It was a promise." He touched his datapad, and an old recording filled the chamber. The voice was distorted by age and poor recording quality. But the words were clear. "We are leaving now, but we will return when we are ready. Remember that we asked for help, and you turned away. We will not forget." The chamber was silent for a long moment. A nervous laughter began from several representatives. "You think these energy readings are from humans?" Chancellor Mordic asked. "A species that could barely reach their own moon 3,000 years ago?" "I think," said Velmuth quietly, "that we are about to find out what 3,000 years of growth can do to a species with nothing left to lose." Far from the council chambers, at the very edge of known space, something impossible was happening. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace, but they were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They were smooth and silver, shaped like flowing water frozen in time. They moved without making any sound or heat signature that normal sensors could detect. On the bridge of the largest ship, a man named Jake Morrison stood looking at the display screens. He was tall and lean, with short brown hair and green eyes that held both sadness and determination. His uniform was simple black fabric, but it seemed to shift and change as he moved, as if it was made of living shadow. "Status report," he said to his crew. Lisa Park, his navigator, turned from her station. Long black hair was tied back in. A simple ponytail. "All fleet elements have arrived safely, Captain. 200 ships are in formation and ready for your orders." Paul Rivera, the chief engineer, spoke up from his console. "All systems are running perfectly, sir. The exotic matter engines are stable, and the dimensional shields are holding at full power." Amy Chen, the communications officer, looked up. From her station, "Sir, I am picking up increased chatter from Council Space. They know we are here." Jake nodded slowly. He had been born in space, like most humans of his generation. His great-grandmother had been one of the last to leave Earth before it became too damaged to support life. Asia told him stories of green fields and blue skies, of a world that had been beautiful before it died. She had also told him about the Council's refusal to help, about how they had watched humanity struggle and turned away. "Open a channel to all Council worlds," he ordered. Amy's fingers moved over her controls. "Channel open, sir." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment his people had prepared for across 3,000 years. His voice was calm and clear as he spoke. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Resilience. We represent the Human Republic, and we have returned to the galaxy after 3,000 years in exile. We remember everything. We remember who helped us, and we remember who did not. We remember every request for aid that was denied, every plea for mercy that was ignored, every time we were told we were not worthy of assistance." He paused, letting his words sink in across hundreds of worlds. "We are no longer the weak species you once knew. We have grown strong in the darkness between galaxies. We have learned things that would amaze and terrify you. But most importantly, we have not forgotten. The time has come for the galaxy to answer for its choices." The transmission ended, leaving silence across space. On Council worlds, leaders stared at their screens in shock. In the depths of space, human ships moved forward like silent ghosts, carrying with them the accumulated anger and power of 3 millennia. The quiet time was over. The storm was about to begin. The first orbital defense station around Kepler Prime simply stopped working. Admiral Zexter watched from his command ship as the massive structure that had protected the planet for 800 years went dark. No explosions, no weapons fire, no signs of damage. It just died. "Sir," called Lieutenant Velkash from her station. "The station's power core has been completely drained. All systems are offline." Before Zexter could respond, another station went dark, then another. Across the entire system, defense platforms that had never failed began shutting down one by one. The Admiral's 4 hands shook as he gripped his command chair. "Where are the human ships?" he demanded. "Cannot see them, sir. Our sensors show nothing, but the stations keep going offline." On the planet below, President Helen Torres stood in the broadcasting center of New Geneva Colony. The building had been empty for 3,000 years, covered in dust and forgotten by the galaxy. Now human engineers had restored it in minutes using technology that seemed like magic. Helen was not like the humans the galaxy remembered. She was tall and graceful, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal. Her eyes were deep blue and seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. When she spoke, her voice carried to every inhabited world in Council space. "People of the galaxy," she began, "I am President Helen Torres of the Human Republic. We have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us and to demand justice for crimes committed against our species." On Nexus Prime, the Council members gathered around their screens in shock. This woman looked almost godlike compared to the primitive humans they remembered from ancient records. 3,000 years ago, Helen continued, humanity faced a crisis on our homeworld. The planet was dying from climate change and pollution. We had the knowledge to fix these problems, but we needed help. We needed resources, technology, and time. We asked this galaxy for aid. Her image appeared on screens across hundreds of worlds. Billions of beings listened as she spoke with calm authority. The Galactic Council met to discuss our request. We have recordings of those meetings. We know what was said. Helen's eyes grew cold. Some of you laughed at our suffering. Others saw profit in our weakness. Most of you simply did not care. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside her, a thin man with gray hair and kind eyes that hid incredible intelligence. He had been working on this presentation for decades, gathering evidence and preparing for this moment. We did not die as you hoped, Marcus said to the cameras. We adapted, we learned, discovered technologies in the void between galaxies that your civilizations cannot imagine. We learned to manipulate dark energy, to bend space and time, to transcend the limits of biology itself. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zexter received urgent messages from across Kfur space. Defense stations were going offline everywhere. Entire fleets were reporting power failures. Humans were somehow attacking their technology without showing themselves. Impossible, he growled. Deploy the 3rd and 7th battle fleets too. The Tau Ceti system. The humans want to fight. We will give them one they will never forget. The Kfur Empire had the largest military in the galaxy. Their ships were massive, covered in weapons and armor. They had conquered dozens of species and never lost a major battle. Admiral Zexter was confident that numbers and firepower would overcome whatever tricks the humans were using, Commander. Ryan Blake received the enemy fleet movements from his scout ships. He was younger than most human commanders, with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes. He had trained his entire life for this moment. Captain Morrison, he said over the communication link. Kfur forces are moving toward Tau Ceti, 300 ships including their newest dreadnoughts. Jake Morrison nodded from the bridge of the Resilience. Very well, Commander Blake. Take your battle group and show them what we have learned. Remember, we are not here to destroy everything. We are here to teach them respect. Understood, sir. We will be gentle. Ryan's ships moved toward the approaching Kfur fleet. To normal sensors, the human vessels looked small and weak compared to the enemy dreadnoughts. But appearances could be very deceiving. The battle began when the Kfur ships opened fire from maximum range. Massive energy beams and missile volleys filled space with deadly light. The human ships seemed to ignore the attacks completely. The weapons passed through them as if they were not there. What is happening? Admiral Zexter demanded from his command ship. Why are our weapons not hitting them? His science officer stared at his instruments in confusion. Sir, the human ships appear to be existing in multiple dimensions at once. Our weapons are hitting them, but in dimensions where they have no substance. Ryan Blake smiled as enemy fire passed harmlessly through his ship. All units activate phase weapons. Target their engine cores. Now the human response was swift and terrible. Beams of energy that existed in folded space struck the Kfur ships in places that should have been impossible to reach. Bypassed shields, armor, and hull plating to strike directly at power cores and critical systems. One by one, the mighty Kfur dreadnoughts went dark. Not destroyed, not exploded, simply turned off like someone had pulled their power cables. Crews found themselves floating helplessly in space as their ships became lifeless metal hulks. Retreat, Admiral Zexter screamed, but it was too late. His own flagship shuddered as something impossible happened to its main engines. The power core that had run for 50 years without problems simply stopped working. Emergency. Lighting cast red shadows across the bridge as the Admiral's crew tried desperately to restore power. Nothing worked. Every system they tried to activate failed the moment they touched the controls. A new voice came over the communication system. Commander Blake's tone was polite but firm. Admiral Zexter, this is Commander Ryan Blake of the human fleet. Your ships are disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are safe but powerless. This is what mercy looks like. The Admiral's red eyes blazed with fury and fear. What do you want, human? We want you to remember this moment, Ryan replied. We want you to understand that we could have erased your entire fleet from existence. We chose not to. We could have killed every one of your crew members. We chose not to. This restraint is not weakness. It is the gift of a species that knows the value of life. As rescue ships arrived to collect the disabled Kfur vessels, Ryan sent a message to all Council worlds. The transmission was simple but chilling. Kfur Empire has fallen in a single day. Their greatest fleet has been defeated without losing a single human life. This is not the extent of our power. This is us being kind. The Council has 7 days to present themselves at Nexus Prime for judgment. Those who do not appear will be collected by force. On her broadcast, President Helen Torres continued speaking to the galaxy. We could have returned as conquerors and destroyers. We could have wiped out every species that wronged us. But we are not you. We remember what it means to show mercy to those who are weaker. Her image appeared in the Great Council chamber where representatives sat in stunned silence. However, she continued, mercy does not mean forgiveness. Justice does not mean revenge. You will answer for your crimes, but you will do so while you still live to learn from your mistakes. Dr. Marcus Webb stepped forward with a datapad in his hands. We have spent 3,000 years documenting every crime committed against humanity. Every vote cast against helping us. Every resource denied. Every colony taken after we left. Every lie told about our disappearance. We have evidence of it all. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in silence. On Nexus Prime, Council members looked at each other with fear and shame. Some species had genuinely tried to help humanity long ago. Others had profited from human suffering. All would now face judgment from a species that had become something beyond their understanding. In the void between stars, human ships moved like silent ghosts toward the Council capital. They carried with them the weight of 3,000 years of exile and the power of technologies that made them gods among mortals. The time for hiding was over. The time for justice had begun. The Great Council chamber had never seen chaos like this. Representatives from 12 species shouted at each other while their security guards nervously fingered their weapons. Some demanded immediate surrender to the humans. Others called for total war. A few simply sat in stunned silence, staring at the empty space where human ships waited just outside the station. Chancellor Mordic pounded his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. His usually calm demeanor had cracked under the pressure. Of the last 7 days, we must decide our response before the humans arrive. What response? General Thokmer roared, his scarred face red with anger. They destroyed our greatest fleet without firing a shot. Our weapons cannot even touch them. Ambassador Silthara of the Ylaneri stood quietly, her large black eyes filled with tears. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why they have returned with such anger. What did we do to deserve this? We did nothing wrong, shouted Councillor Zeftai of the Merchant Consortium. Humans were dangerous and primitive.
As the quarantine was necessary for galactic security.
Old Archivist Velmuth shook his head sadly. From his corner seat, I have been reading the old records again. We did far more than quarantine them. We actively blocked their requests for aid. We voted against every proposal to help them. Some of us even celebrated when they disappeared. The argument was interrupted by a sudden silence that seemed to fall over the entire station. Security alarms should have been ringing, but there was only quiet. The lights dimmed for a moment, then returned to normal. When they brightened again, there were new figures standing in the chamber. President Helen Torres stood in the center of the room, as if she had always been there. Beside her was a man in simple black clothing who seemed to bend light around him like living shadow. Behind them stood several other humans, each radiating an aura of power that made the air itself feel heavy. How did you get in here? Chancellor Mordic demanded, though his voice shook as he spoke. Helen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We are no longer limited by walls and doors, Chancellor. We exist in dimensions your species cannot perceive. Your security systems are designed to stop beings who exist only in normal space. Kevin Nash, the human security chief, stepped forward. He was a large man with calm brown eyes that seemed to see everything at once. This station has been under our control since we arrived. Your weapons have been disabled, but your communication systems now belong to us. You are here because we allow you to be here. The council representatives pressed back in their seats as more humans appeared throughout the chamber. They had not walked in or teleported. They had simply become visible, as if they had been standing there all along. Honored Council Helen, said her voice carrying easily through the great room. We have come to present evidence of your crimes against humanity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez will show you what we have discovered. A woman with short red hair stepped forward, carrying a device that looked like a crystal sphere. Dr. Rodriguez had dedicated her life to uncovering the truth about humanity's exile. Her green eyes were bright with intelligence and cold with purpose. What you are about to see, Elena said, was created using quantum archaeology. This technology allows us to reconstruct past events from the quantum signatures left behind by all matter and energy. Nothing is ever truly forgotten. Every word spoken, every decision made, every vote cast leaves traces that we can now read. She activated the device, and the center of the chamber filled with a shimmering holographic image. Suddenly, the council members were looking at the same room 3,000 years in the past. They could see their predecessors sitting in the same seats, debating humanity's fate. The recording was perfect, down to the smallest detail. They could hear every word, see every expression, feel every emotion, as if they were truly there. The human delegation requests immediate aid for their climate crisis, said the ancient chancellor. Their planet is dying and they need our help. To save it, the council members watched in horror as their ancestors laughed. They saw Kfur representatives call humans weak and worthless. They heard consortium members calculating how much profit they could make from abandoned human colonies. They witnessed species after species vote against helping a dying world. Ambassador Sothora broke down in tears as she watched her own people's representatives stand and declare, "The Ylanari will vote to help the humans in any way we can." But then the recording showed the final vote count. Even her compassionate species had been outvoted by the others. This is not the only meeting, Elena continued, changing the recording. We have reconstructed hundreds of sessions where humanity's fate was discussed. Would you like to see the meeting where you decided to claim our colonies after we left? Or perhaps the celebration held when our last ship departed the galaxy? General Thackamar stood up, his hand moving toward his weapon. Before he could draw. He found his arm frozen in place. Kevin Nash had not moved, but somehow the Kfur general could not complete his motion. Violence will not help you here, Kevin said quietly. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your strength cannot match ours. Your only choice is to listen and understand what you have done. Helen stepped closer to the council seats, and several representatives shrank back from her presence. She seemed larger than life, as if she existed in more space than her body. Should occupy? Some of you may think you are innocent, she said, looking directly at Ambassador Silthera. Your species voted to help us. But you also voted to accept the final decision when help was denied. You did not fight for us. You did not refuse to participate in our exile. You let the majority decide our fate and then pretended it was not your responsibility. Alina activated another recording, this one showing the aftermath of humanity's departure. Council ships had immediately moved to claim human colonies. Valuable resources were divided among the member species. Human technology was studied and reverse-engineered. Their culture was erased from official records. You did not just refuse to help us, Helen continued. You profited from our suffering. You built your prosperity on the bones of our civilization. And when future generations asked about the humans, you told them we had destroyed ourselves, made us the villains of our own tragedy. Chancellor Mordick found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Robert Stone materialized beside the Chancellor's chair. He was a stern man, with gray hair and eyes like steel. His mere presence seemed to make the air colder. We want acknowledgement, Robert said. We want you to admit what you did to us. We want public recognition of your crimes. We want the truth told to every being in this galaxy. And then, asked Ambassador Silthera, her voice full of hope and fear. Helen's expression softened slightly as she looked at the Ylanari representative. Then we will begin the work of ensuring this never happens again. The council, as you know it, will be dissolved. A new government will be established under human oversight. Some species will be forgiven and elevated. Others will face consequences for their actions. Lena stepped forward with another device, this one projecting a list of names and species. We have spent 3,000 years cataloging every crime, every vote, every decision. We know which of you actively worked against us, and which of you simply stood by. We know who profited from our exile and who tried to help. Justice will be individual, not collective. Counselor Zeftai laughed nervously. Cannot judge an entire galaxy. You are only one species among hundreds. Kevin Nash smiled, and the expression was more frightening than any threat. We are no longer just one species. We have transcended the limitations that once bound us. We exist across multiple dimensions. We can manipulate matter at the quantum level. We have technologies that can reshape reality itself. Most importantly, Helen added, we have the moral authority that comes from being the victims of your injustice. We have the right to judge, because we are the ones who were wronged. The chamber fell silent as the weight of 3,000 years of guilt settled on the council members. Some wept openly. Others sat in stunned silence. A few began to speak, trying to offer explanations or excuses. But the humans simply waited. Finally, old Archivist Velmuth stood up slowly. His ancient body shook as he looked at President Torres. We are guilty of everything you have shown us. We failed you when you needed help. We've profited from your suffering. We erased your memory from history. What punishment do we deserve? Looked at the old record keeper with something that might have been respect. The punishment has already begun, Archivist. You must live with the knowledge of what you have done. You must face the truth that you tried so hard to hide. You must help us build something better from the ashes of your shame. The humans began to fade from view, becoming translucent like ghosts. Only Helen remained solid and visible. Have 24 hours to prepare your formal surrender, she announced. Representatives from each species will present themselves for individual judgment. Those who cooperate will be treated with mercy. Those who resist will discover that our patience has limits. Emperor Thokmer stood in his war room on the Kfur homeworld, staring at screens that showed the complete surrender of most council species. The Yillinari had formally apologized and begged for mercy. The consortium had offered their entire treasury as payment for their crimes. Even his own generals were whispering about submission. Cowards, he growled, his massive fists clenching. All of them are cowards. His war advisor, General Kexthal, nervously approached the Emperor's throne. Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider the humans' offer of mercy. They have shown incredible restraint so far. Restraint. Thakmer's red eyes blazed with fury. They have humiliated us, made us look weak before the entire galaxy. No human will ever rule over the Kfur Empire. The Emperor activated his private communication system, sending coded messages to hidden military bases across Kfur space. For centuries, his people had been secretly building weapons based on ancient technology found in ruins left by a long-dead civilization, planet killers. Weapons so terrible that even the Kfur had been afraid to use them. If we cannot rule this galaxy, Thakmer declared, then no one will. Activate the Doomsday Protocol. 3 star systems away. Admiral Catherine Brooks received the intelligence reports about increased Kfur military activity. She was a small woman with silver hair and calm blue eyes, but her presence commanded absolute respect from every human under her command. Task Force Nemesis, she said, into her communication device. We have confirmation that the Kfur are preparing to use forbidden weapons. All units prepare for immediate deployment. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the link from the flagship Resilience. Admiral, should we attempt to negotiate first? Negative, Catherine replied. Our intelligence shows they are activating planet-killer weapons. We cannot allow them to threaten civilian populations. Authorization granted. For full combat operations, the human fleet moved toward Kfur. Space like silent death. Their ships seemed to bend reality around them, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. To the Kfur defenders, it looked like ghosts were coming to destroy them. On the Kfur homeworld, Colonel Stephen Price and Major Janet Foster led the human ground forces. They did not arrive in landing ships or drop pods. They simply appeared inside the planet's most secure military bunkers, as if they had been walking through an open door. Stephen was tall and lean with dark hair and serious brown eyes. He had spent decades studying Kfur military tactics and knew exactly where to strike. Janet was shorter but moved with the fluid grace of someone who could kill with her bare hands. Together, they commanded soldiers who seemed more like living nightmares than people. Target the communication centers first, Stephen ordered his troops. Cut off their ability to coordinate the doomsday weapons. The human soldiers moved through. Solid walls, as if they were made of air. Kfur guards fired energy weapons at enemies who simply absorbed the blasts and kept walking. When the humans touched Kfur equipment, it simply stopped working at the molecular level. "Impossible," whispered a Kfur technician, as he watched his console dissolve into basic atoms. "What are you?" The human soldier looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold starlight. "We are what your people forced us to become." Above the planet, the space battle had already begun. Kfur dreadnoughts fired every weapon they had at the approaching human fleet. Antimatter cannons, quantum torpedoes, reality-disrupting bombs. All of it passed harmlessly through the human ships as if they were attacking shadows. Admiral Catherine Brooks watched from her command ship as enemy fire went right through her fleet. "All ships, activate dimensional weapons. Target their power cores only. We want prisoners, not corpses." Timothy Chen, the fleet's chief science officer, coordinated the attack from his position on the bridge. He was a young man with brilliant mind that could process calculations at impossible speeds. His job was to make sure the human weapons hit their targets in the correct dimension. "Weapons locked on target," he reported, firing quantum disruptors. The human response was swift and terrible. Beams of energy that existed in folded space reached through the barriers between dimensions to strike directly at the heart of every Kfur ship. Not at their hulls or shields, but at the very atoms that held their engines together. One by one, the mighty Kfur fleet went dark. Ships that had ruled space for 1,000 years became floating metal coffins as their power sources simply ceased to exist. But Emperor Thokmer had one last card to play. Deep beneath his palace, a weapon that could destroy entire star systems began to power up. If he was going to die, he would take as many humans with him as possible. "Activate the Star Killer," he commanded his remaining technicians. Target the system where most of their fleet is gathered. The weapon fired, sending a beam of pure destruction toward the human fleet. It was energy powerful enough to make a sun explode, to wipe out everything within several light years. The Kfur watched with satisfaction as their ultimate weapon reached its target. The beam struck Admiral Brooks' flagship directly. For a moment, space itself seemed to catch fire as unimaginable forces collided. Then something impossible happened. The human ship absorbed the energy. All of it. The weapon that could kill stars was swallowed by human technology like water poured into an ocean. "Energy absorption complete," reported Timothy Chen, as if he was discussing the weather. "Redirecting power to dimensional engines. Preparing." To return the favor, Catherine Brooks nodded calmly. To fire. The same energy that the Kfur had used to try to destroy the human fleet came back at them through dimensional rifts. But instead of destroying the Kfur homeworld, it surgically disabled every military installation on the planet. Weapons facilities, communication centers, government buildings. All of them simply stopped working as the redirected energy turned their technology into harmless metal and plastic. On the surface, Colonel Stephen Price and his soldiers had reached the Imperial Palace. They walked through the massive gates as if the metal barriers were not there. Kfur guards fired desperately at enemies who could not be touched by normal weapons. "Where is your emperor?" Stephen asked, a trembling guard captain. "I will never tell you," the captain replied. "Oh." His voice shook with fear. Janet Foster stepped forward and looked directly into the captain's eyes. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You will tell us, or we will find him ourselves. Either way, your resistance only delays the inevitable." The guard captains will crumble under the weight of her presence. The throne room. Top level of the central tower. Stephen nodded his thanks and led his soldiers up through the palace. They did not climb stairs or use elevators. They simply moved upward through solid matter as if they were walking through air. Emperor Thakmar waited for them in his throne room, surrounded by his personal guard. He held an ancient sword in his massive hands, a weapon that had killed countless enemies over the centuries. "Come then, humans," he roared. "Face me in honorable combat." Stephen Price walked calmly toward the Emperor, while energy blasts from the guards passed harmlessly through his body. When he reached Thokmer, he simply placed his hand on the Emperor's sword. The ancient metal crumbled to dust at his touch.
"A combat
"Implies you have a chance to win," Stephen said quietly. "You do not. Your empire is finished. Your weapons are broken. Your fleets are disabled. The only choice you have left is whether you surrender with dignity or continue this pointless resistance." Thokmer stared at the pile of dust that had once been his sword. Around him, his guards had stopped firing, finally understanding that their weapons were useless. The Emperor, who had never known defeat, slowly sank to his knees. "What have you become?" he whispered. Major Janet Foster stepped beside her colonel, her eyes glowing with inner light. "We have become what we needed to become to survive. We have transcended the limitations of normal biology and physics. We exist across multiple dimensions. We can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. We become gods walking among mortals. But most importantly," Stephen added, "we have become the force that ensures species like yours can never again destroy those who are weaker. Your empire built its power on the suffering of others. That ends today." Throughout Kfur space, human forces had completed their mission. Every military installation was disabled. Every weapon was destroyed. Every ship was captured or neutralized. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had fallen in less than a day. Admiral Catherine Brooks broadcast a message to all remaining Council forces. "The Kfur Empire has surrendered. All other species have 24 hours to formally submit to human authority. Those who comply will be treated with mercy. Those who resist will share the fate of those who chose to fight gods with the weapons of mortals." In the Imperial throne room, Emperor Thakmer looked up at the humans, who had conquered his empire without breaking a sweat. "What happens to us now?" Stephen Price's expression softened slightly. "Now you learn what it means to live under the protection of those you once oppressed. You will be judged for your crimes, but you will not be destroyed. We are not you. Remember what it means to show mercy." 6 months had passed since the galaxy surrendered to humanity, and the changes were beyond anything the Council species had imagined. Where once there had been separate governments fighting over resources and territory, now there was order under the Human Protectorate President Helen Torres, no longer ruled from a single world. Our capital ship, the Harmony, existed partially outside normal space-time, appearing wherever it was needed most. The ship itself seemed alive, its walls shifting and changing based on the needs of its occupants. Council representatives who visited found themselves in rooms that were bigger inside than outside, defying every law of physics they understood. Dr. Patricia Hayes had taken on one of the most difficult jobs in the galaxy, as Director of Species Relations. She had to decide which former Council species deserved mercy and which needed stronger punishment. Patricia was a kind woman with warm brown eyes, but she carried the weight of 3,000 years of human suffering in her decisions. "The Ylanari have completed their first year of service," she reported to President Torres during their weekly meeting. "They have been working to restore damaged ecosystems on 17 different worlds. Their natural empathy makes them excellent at healing environmental damage." Helen nodded approvingly as she reviewed the reports. "And the Kfur? More difficult," Patricia admitted. "Emperor Thokmer and his top generals are still in rehabilitation. They are learning what it means to live without the power to hurt others. Some are adapting better than others. The Kfur homeworld had been transformed. Where once stood massive military fortresses, now there were schools and hospitals built with human technology. Former soldiers worked alongside human advisors to clean up the environmental damage their industrial war machine had caused. General Robert Stone walked through the streets of the Kfur capital, observing the changes. Citizens who had once cheered for conquest now learned about cooperation and peace. It was slow work, but Robert had patience. He had lived for centuries and could wait as long as necessary for true change. "How are they progressing?" asked Captain Scott Allen, who had joined Robert for the inspection. Scott was younger than most human leaders, with sandy brown hair and optimistic green eyes. He had been chosen to lead the Colonial Restoration Project because of his ability to see hope in even the darkest situations. "Better than expected," Robert replied. "The younger Kfur are more willing to learn. They never knew a galaxy without human oversight, so this seems normal to them. It's the older ones who struggle with the changes." Scott nodded as they passed a group of Kfur. Children playing with human toys that taught lessons about sharing and cooperation. "I sometimes wonder if we're being too gentle with them." "Revenge would be easier," Robert agreed. "But revenge doesn't build a better future. We learned that lesson during our exile." Meanwhile, on the restored world of New Terra, Commander Scott. Alan supervised the rebuilding of humanity's greatest achievement. The planet had once been a human colony world, abandoned during the Great Exodus 3,000 years ago. Now, it bloomed with life again. Its cities rising like crystal gardens from landscapes that shifted between dimensions. Human refugees who had spent millennia in the void between galaxies finally had a home again. But this was not the primitive colony their ancestors had left behind. New Terra existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its buildings reaching into spaces that normal physics said should not exist. "The quantum farms are producing beyond all expectations," reported Dr. Karen White, the colony's chief scientist. Was a serious woman with graying hair who had dedicated her life to making sure humanity never again faced starvation or resource shortages. Scott smiled as he watched families walk through parks where the trees grew fruit that could feed a person for days and flowers that purified the air with each breath. "Our ancestors would be amazed to see what we've built." "Would they approve?" Karen asked quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if we've become something they wouldn't recognize." It was a question that haunted many humans. Dr. Karen White led a growing group who worried that their transformation had cost them their essential humanity. They had power beyond imagination, but had they lost their souls in gaining it? "We still protect the weak," Scott replied. "We still show mercy to our enemies. We still remember what it means to be human, even if we're no longer limited by human biology." "But for how long?" Kieran pressed. "Power corrupts, even the previously oppressed. What happens when the next generation of humans has never known weakness or suffering? Will they still care about justice?" Before Scott could answer, an alert chimed through the colony's communication system. President Torres was about to address the galaxy from Earth, Self.Earth. The name still carried weight throughout human space. For 3,000 years it had been a dead world, poisoned by climate change and abandoned by its children. Human technology had restored it to something beyond its former beauty. The ancient homeworld now existed as a paradise that spanned multiple dimensions. Oceans that reflected stars from parallel universes. Mountains that reached into folded space. Cities that housed billions while taking up no more room than small towns. It was Earth as it never could have been, perfected by the descendants of those who had been forced to leave it behind. President Torres stood in the restored United Nations building, but her words reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. Behind her, windows showed the New York skyline stretching, possibly high into a sky that held 3 different suns from 3 different dimensions. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 millennia of growth and change. "Today marks the first anniversary of humanity's return to known space. We have much to celebrate and much to remember." Worlds, billions of beings stopped their activities to listen. Ulinary farmers paused in their environmental restoration work. Kfur students looked up from their peace studies. Even the proud consortium merchants stopped counting profits to hear what their new rulers had to say. "When we left this galaxy 3,000 years ago, we were a broken species. Our world was dying. Our people were scattered. We'd been abandoned by those we thought were our friends and betrayed by those we had trusted. We had every reason to become bitter, to let hatred consume us, to return as conquerors seeking only revenge." Admiral Catherine Brooks stood beside the president, her silver hair gleaming in the multidimensional sunlight. Her fleet now patrolled every system in the galaxy, not as invaders, but as protectors. Human ships had become guardians, ensuring that no species could again build weapons capable of destroying worlds. "Instead," Helen continued, We chose to become something better. We learned to transcend the limitations that had bound us. We gained power beyond imagination. But most importantly, we never forgot the lessons our suffering taught us. She gestured to the restored Earth around her, where former enemies now worked alongside humans to build a better future. This galaxy will never again see species abandoned. In their time of need, no world will be allowed to die while others watch and do nothing. No civilization will be permitted to build its prosperity on the suffering of the weak. Dr. Marcus Webb joined the broadcast, his kind eyes reflecting the wisdom of centuries spent preparing for this moment. We have shared our knowledge freely with those who have earned our trust. The Illinari now possess technology that will heal their damaged worlds in decades instead of centuries. Species that showed compassion during our exile have been elevated to levels of prosperity they never imagined possible. But, President Torres added, her voice growing stern, those who profited from cruelty, who celebrated our suffering, who built their power on the pain of others, they remain under our guidance until they prove they have truly changed. The broadcast shifted to show scenes from across the galaxy. Former Kfur warriors learning to build instead of destroy. Consortium merchants discovering that cooperation brought greater profits than exploitation. Council species working together, under human oversight, to solve problems that had plagued them for millennia. Some of you may ask if we have become tyrants, Helen said, addressing the concerns that many aliens whispered in private. We prefer to think of ourselves as gardeners. This galaxy is our garden now, and gardens require constant care. Weeds must be removed. Sick plants must be healed. New growth must be nurtured and protected. She looked directly into the camera, and every being watching felt as if she was speaking to them personally. We are no longer the species you abandoned 3,000 years ago. We are what you forced us to become. We are what we needed to become to ensure this never happens again. The camera pulled back to show Earth in all its impossible glory, a world that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, a paradise built by the descendants of refugees who had been cast out into the void. Around it, human ships stood eternal watch, guardians ensuring that the garden of the galaxy would bloom under their care. We have returned not as the victims you once knew, Helen Torres concluded, but as the gardeners this galaxy needed. We'll tend this garden for as long as necessary. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between extinction and exile.